Will the world's most vulnerable fighter survive? Jinu's job as a hunter is to cross the gate and fight the creatures on the other side, but he's frequently injured and has many near-death experiences due to his rank. He spends the proceeds from the monster hunting raid on his sick mother's medical bills and to support his younger sister Jinwoo, who's walking towards a construction site. Jun-hee doesn't understand why Jenu tries so hard and puts his life in such danger because he tells her it's all for fun, believing that if he told her the truth, he'd be more embarrassed of his situation. The battle is over, and everyone received their magical cores from the raid. The items left over after killing a monster are known as magical cores, and one from a C-ranking monster can be worth thousands of dollars. This raid rewards General with an E-ranked magical core, which is insufficient compensation for the risks he took, but he can't really aim much higher while he's moping about. When a dungeon's main boss is defeated, the gate to access it quickly closes, but the gate to this dungeon is still wide open and hasn't changed, so it appears that Mr. Song claims that normally they would contact their Hunters Guild to request permission to continue raiding, but in his greed, he claims that if they wait, other hunters will get to that side of the dungeon and take their profits, so he decides 8 votes in total. With 8 votes yes, no, it's up to Jin Woo to decide, and given his meager earnings from that side of the dungeon, he decides to go in order to help his mother and sister. The entire party enters together, but after 40 minutes of walking, they've yet to reach the main boss's chamber, where he apologizes to a very irritated junkie for forcing everyone to go into the other part of the dungeon when she had voted against it, but she hasn't given up hope. When the chamber doors closed behind the party, one of the party members decided to leave, but when he placed his hand on the door handle, his head rolled onto the ground and his body dropped to the floor. No one believed their eyes. Jin Woo then recalls Jun's comments about the giant statue staring at them and trembling, so he turns around and the statue is now staring at him, as if judging every move and action. Jin Woo recalls all of his previous near-death experiences, and he couldn't even afford better equipment with the magical course he received because he needed every penny for his sister and mother. Blast from the statue's eyes. Many in the party were quick to react to Jin Woo's words and had ducked just in time, but others weren't quick enough. After all, Mr. Song orders everyone to stay in their positions to avoid another attack, but Junior is unable to move at all as she's paralyzed on the ground. Apparently, she can't handle fear very well, and that's why she only does D-rank raids, despite being B-rank. He, Jin Woo, and Mr. Song analyze the situation and conclude that the commandments mentioned earlier may refer to the largest statue. Thus, the statue on the throne is the Lord of the Commandments. This makes sense because in order to avoid the rays, they had to get down on their knees or completely lay down, which corresponds to the first commandment. They end up on their knees to avoid the blasts when they worship the Lord. Mr. Song's arm was shattered by the beam, but he can't be treated because one of the 3 healers they brought was destroyed. Another is shaking in fear in the corner, and Jun can't even move. They weren't expecting this when they entered a D-ranked dungeon, so they're taken aback. A party member can't stand the uncertainty of lying still any longer, so he ignores Mr. Song's warnings and rushes to the door before the statue targets him, but he's too slow, and only his feet remain after the statue shoots another beam. Everyone's surprised at how easily these statues can destroy them, but Mr. Song and Jinwoo are perplexed as to why the monsters they face don't simply leap at them. Because the statue doesn't fire any rays at Puck, they all stand up, but Jinwoo knows it's too early to declare victory. The statue moves slowly as a whole and stands on its feet, looking down from a greater height. Jinwoo discusses the second commandment, praise the Lord, and believes it means singing and praising a party member who used to be a member of the church choir and begins singing a song far from working, and apparently singing a worship song for another god was not the way to go. The statue walks on, squashing those in his path, and the survivors decide to spread out to avoid being stepped on. Puck goes to a side chamber, thinking about how his pregnant wife had told him to get a safer job, but he still decided to go on the raid. Even though he's far from the giant statue, he's not safe as one of the other statues standing behind him slashes him in 2. Well, and thus, that side character is killed. Jin Woo is trying to figure out how to interpret the second commandment while pulling a terrified Junior away from the statue. There's nowhere to hide because the statue's weapons are slashing through everyone who gets close to them, and they get stepped on by a massive Lord statue in the center with a disturbing grin. Jinwoo then notices that some of the statues are holding instruments, and because they aren't weapons, he orders everyone to run to them. Junior tries desperately to heal General, but she notices Jinwoo fading. He tries so hard that she coughs up blood, which she manages to stop, saving Jinwoo's life. The party has little time to recover as the statue moves again, this time raising a circular structure from the ground, declares it to be an altar similar to those used for sacrifices in ancient cultures, and reminds the party of the last commandment: demonstrate your faith with only 6 people remaining from the original 17. Kim then turns on Mr. Song, threatening him with a sword in order for him to become the sacrifice, because it was his own greed that brought them there, and he must accept responsibility. Mr. Song is so deeply troubled by everything that's occurred, so he agrees to proceed slowly and willingly. Mr. Song approaches the structure, but all that happens is that an orange flame appears behind him. When Jinwoo notices this, he requests to be brought to the altar as well, reasoning that they must all be within the circle for the next trial to begin. More flames appear as Jinwoo and his supporters enter the circle, and Junhee and Kim join the remaining party members. All of the statues with weapons that had been near the walls begin to approach them. The rest of the group is terrified, but Jinwoo has already planned his next move. He looks at one of the statues and then averts his gaze, confirming that the statues only move when no one is looking. Jinwoo quickly relays this information to his fellow hunt centers, which works until one of them succumbs to the pressure and dashes towards the door in an attempt to escape before the statues catch up with her. She walks through the door unscathed, which I wasn't expecting given how things were going. Jinwoo isn't as surprised as I am to see the party member across the door. In fact, he dismisses the possibility of it working by observing the orange and blue flames and how the blue flames constantly go around them while the orange flames go out only when one of them leaves the circle. Jinwoo cracks the code before the other hunter who was helping him stand, because he has no foot, drops him on the ground and makes a dash for it as well. He too makes it in time, but the doors close slightly behind him, as they apparently did with the other hunter who went through earlier quickly. Jinwoo tells the only remaining members of the circle, Mr. Song, Kim, and Junhee, that if anyone else leaves, there won't be enough people. Kim, on the other hand, questions General about how he knows the door won't close once the last blue flame is extinguished. Jinwoo is unable to respond, so Kim fills the void by stating that this was only because of Jinwoo that the few who remained survived, and that despite the fact that he had always looked down on him and never actually expected anything from him, he was the one who saved him. Junhoon is moved by his words, but his feelings are short-lived when Kim says, "I have a family, I can't stay here any longer, thank you," and flees. As Kim walks past the door, which is now mostly closed, and there aren't enough people to keep the statue still, Jinwoo feels all hope leave him. Mr. Song instructs Junhee to assist Jinwoo in fleeing while he remains behind to keep the door open in order to sacrifice himself. Junhee tries to move to Jinwoo to take him, but her knees collapse from the amount of healing she had to do earlier. Jinwoo doesn't waste any time telling Mr. Song to take Junhee with him and flee. Mr. Song protests, but Jinwoo knows that with his missing foot and Junhee's legs, neither of them will be able to escape. Junhee is hesitant, but Jinwoo hands her his Mr. Song and leaves Jinwoo alone, grateful that his sacrifice will allow them to live. He grabs a nearby sword and swings it at the statue soldiers, refusing to accept his doom without a fight. As the prompt floats above Jinwoo's head, he chooses to become a player, and everything fades to black shortly after General awakens in the hospital, wondering if it was all worth it. Well, that's the end of the story. I guess Jinwoo is the world's weakest hunter after all. Just kidding. The inspectors leave, and Jinwoo decides to fiddle with the screen in the meantime. But just as he goes to check on him, his sister bursts in to check on him. Jinwoo asks his sister Tina if she can see this, to see if his head was hurt, and the two briefly catch up before she leaves. Quest, he received a few rewards such as status recovery and random item box, confirming that the system is completely real, and he clearly needs to start using it as a result of completing the penalty. Quest, he received a key that will allow him to unlock and enter a new dungeon. You'll need to use it at the third entrance of Hapsan Station, so he goes there before using the key, as it's completely different from any other dungeon he's seen before, and as the system explains in a prompt, you'll need to use the Hearthstone to kill the dungeon's boss to escape instantly. Fang Raikon has a terrifying lower jaw made of steel and a ferocious temperament for the world's weakest hunter. It would be impossible to defeat. Fortunately, he realizes he has Sang-Shik's sword in his inventory and quickly cuts the Raikon in half. He recalls that the sword was worth 3 million won, approximately $2,000 US, so he believes it'll serve him well. For a while, more steel-fanged icons begin to appear. General returns to his menu screen, noting that each of his 5 stats appears to increase by 1 point each time he levels up, and that if he completes his daily quest, he receives 3 stat points that he can allocate to any slot. While the monsters in this dungeon don't appear to drop magical horrors, like the one He Fang's Lichen charges forehead from the shadows. He quickly raises his sword and leaps to action, knowing he has no choice but to fight. As he fights the Rykins, the system rewards him. Jinwoo has earned the moniker of Wolf Slayer as a result of his extensive fighting. Jinwoo's blade is dulled and cracked, but he also received a 40-point damage boost against Beast.